one of my mission statements to end mycostigma. A lot of people have that stigma that mushrooms are going to get me high, or they're going to make me sick, or I buy them in the store and they taste good on certain things. There's a lot more to the consumption of mushrooms than just those limiting aspects. There's the differing, like I mentioned, the symbiotic connection between myself and nature that reflects externally, but internally it can reflect too. As we consume mushrooms that are adaptogenic to their environment, they are adaptogenic within our bodies, so they can help support us where we need support.
Fungi, particularly mushrooms, have influenced popular culture for centuries. In Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, the caterpillar said, "One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter." One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it aloud, and in another moment, it was out of sight. Fungi have also been a part of the human diet for untold centuries. Our guest, Sam the Fungi, is dedicated to ending mycophobia, changing mycostigma, and connecting people through the power of mycelium. Sam joins Jon and Scoop for a wide-ranging talk about all things fungi.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Plutopia News Network. Our guest today is Sam McChesney, who is actually known as Sam the Fungi, and that's Fungi, fungi. Sam is mycelium in human form. He's a founding member and part of the leadership at the Central Texas Mycological Society. And in that context, he hosts ecology walks, creates edible mushroom beds, facilitates garden inoculations, and teaches about mycology and mushroom cultivation around Texas. Hey, Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
How did you become a fungi?
Well, about 6 years ago, I had a really bad stomach issue. Developed a lot of stress, and I had just recently been exposed to psychedelic mushrooms and saw how much they could affect my mind. And so I was assured that there would be another mushroom out there that could help me balance out my body. So I started doing research. I found one called Reshi, which is an immunomodulator, I learned, and bought some fruits from Host Defense, Paul Stamets company. And then I bought a fruiting kit from them as well. And once I started taking it regularly, my mom and I started taking it together. Through that, we bonded more, and we also experienced a lot of the health benefits that came from drinking regular amounts of reishi tea, which is lower blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, it's a modulator, so it balances you out. So if you're having an under immune response, it'll bring you up to par. And then if you're having an overactive immune response, it'll bring you back down. So we were just experiencing a lot more balance in our lives. We were able to bond together. And through that, I was convinced that there was something about these mushrooms that I needed to delve into.
I guess I should show, this is Host Defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah, it is.
So for people who are just listening and not watching the video, it's hostdefense.com.
Mm-hmm. And started studying more mushrooms, started looking into what mushrooms grow in my area and how many other mushroom people are even in my area. And when I started looking around to see who was also a mycophile like me that was out actively studying mushrooms in our area, I couldn't find hardly anybody. One person I did find, Daniel Reyes from Myco Alliance. He was working at a project in Austin called Circle Acres, that's the site, with Ecology Action. And so him, as the company Myco Alliance and Ecology Action, were working together to help remediate a brownfield out there. So I went out to go meet him. And when I went out to meet him, there was also a meeting with this group of people that there were also a group of mycophiles in Central Texas that were gathering together to talk, and they wanted to potentially form a nonprofit to help focus solely on mushroom education and connecting people to the power of mycelium, but also educating them about the conservation of mycology and all the different aspects of fungi. And I was all for it. I was about a year into mushroom cultivation and study at that point, deep cultivation and consistent study, and knew that there was gonna be something that came from this group, so I should stick around. So I kept showing up to the meetings. We kept doing more and more moves in the community. Myco Alliance kept hosting classes, bringing in people from Pennsylvania like William Padilla Brown, Mycosymbiote, that's his company name, and having them talk about their specialties, interesting more and more people, interesting me more and more. And finally, in 2019, we decided to become an official organization and formed together as the Central Texas Mycological Society. Around the same time, I solidified and formalized myself as Sam the Fungi. I knew that I wanted to do, yes, that's us right there.
Yeah.
We have an event tonight actually at 7. That's going to be pretty cool. But about every third Thursday of the month, we have differing events online, different ways that you can connect with us, both in person and online. So in 2019, we formed together and decided that we wanted to even do this. So we gathered and wrote our bylaws, gathered together what is our mission, what are we trying to do in the community, how are we going to even attempt to do this in the community, where are we going to do it at, and found a tight-knit group of people that were serious about dedicating their time and spending their effort in growing our community. Gathered together regularly, and through consistency, we've built ourselves to about 500 members now, which is pretty phenomenal considering we're years old. So yeah, it's growing really fast. It's going really well. There's more and more people that are getting interested in mushrooms, especially now that the movie Fantastic Fungi has come out and a lot of people are being able to see it because it's on Netflix. That has made a tremendous impact in the amount of attention our organization is getting, but also, and more importantly, the attention that fungus is getting in our world, because there's so many differing aspects. We've done classes with the Mycological Society about mycomaterials, like differing building materials that are going to be mycelium based, clothing, different dyes that people do, like clothing dyes to change the color of things, as well as like this one, fungal immunity, which is, does mycelium have its own fungal immune system? How does it work, and what does it do, and how does it do what it does? So there's so many aspects to mushrooms and fungus that they're to study it is to enter into a world of wonder where it just never ends. You just can consistently find more and more beautiful things.
Well, before you like did the, I guess, psilocybin mushrooms, had you thought about any of this, or was that really sort of your first step, kind of looking at the medicinal use?
Those opened my eyes to seeing nature as medicine, I would say. But before that, I very much was more of the pharmaceutical route, didn't really see nature as a symbiotic with myself, viewed myself more separate from nature. So I would say I didn't really pay attention to fungus before the psilocybin trip. But after the trip, I was much more attuned to that awareness and that vibration, that I was able to study it more and able to really put myself in a symbiotic connection to nature instead of a parasitic one.
All of the uses you detailed for fungi.
Mhm.
It reminds me of the evolution of the hemp business. Originally, it was just let's get high with the marijuana, but
Yeah.
hemp became a product that was not had nothing to do with getting high. It had to do with wellness, clothing, all sorts of other things. And do you see your efforts heading in that kind of direction rather than just it's great to get high. When I first became aware of mushrooms abilities to modify your consciousness, I knew nothing about it, and that's really the only thing I thought about with mushrooms was magic mushrooms. But it's gone a lot further past that, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of my mission statements, to end mycostigma. A lot of people have that stigma that mushrooms are going to get me high, or they're going to make me sick, or I buy them in the store and they taste good on certain things. There's a lot more to the consumption of mushrooms than just those limiting aspects. There's the differing, like I mentioned, the symbiotic connection between myself and nature that reflects externally, but internally it can reflect too. As we consume mushrooms that are adaptogenic to their environment, they are adaptogenic within our bodies, so they can help support us where we need support. So I would say that there's a lot more aspects to it than just getting high, and I try to communicate that to everybody that I meet, especially those that are seeking psychedelic mushrooms from me. Because I'm like, why are you really asking? Because you want to have a good time, and most of the time that's the case. They just want to have fun, or they just want to escape from something. So it opens the door for a deeper conversation when you ask, why are you taking a mushroom? And then when you're on the mushrooms too, like, I find their psychoactive effects to not just be limited to psilocybin if you're sensitive enough to it. Because if you're perceptive, you can see that when you take regular amounts of lion's mane, that it does eventually become psychoactive, because you'll notice a change in your mood. You'll notice a change in your experience after regularly consuming reishi, after regularly consuming chaga, after regularly consuming these adaptogenic mushrooms that don't necessarily get you high, but over time give you an effect on your mind.
You know, one of the eye openers for me was Star Trek Discovery, because they have this character, Paul Stamets, and he is interacting with the mycelial network that actually is the basis for the warp drive. And
Yeah.
it's like, wow, I never thought about the idea of a mycelial network that's like intergalactic. And then I learned that the character was named for Paul Stamets, who's, a mycologist. Yeah, that was kind of a real eye opener, and I think that a lot of people will find their way into more discovery about mycology just through that portal.
Yeah, absolutely. The science fiction portal, I mean, if you look at mushrooms, they are kind of straight out of science fiction. There's so many different facets of them that have yet to be discovered, and that are so deeply fascinating and interesting. But yes, I agree that bringing people into the, like, especially the words they're using, like the spore drive and the mycelial network, like those are words that when people are more accustomed to hearing them, when they associate that TV show that makes them feel good to the nature that when they go outside they also feel good, that word also has a positive association. So it can lead to, like, when people hear that word, having a positive association to whatever event is happening pertaining to mycelium, or at least that's something I think about.
And so I went on a walk with you the other day and a group of other people, and I walk around in nature quite a bit, and I really I was unaware of how many mushrooms there were. and how easy they were to find, really, if you were looking for them. You just have to be thinking about it, you know?
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. They're kind of pervasive around here, aren't they?
Yeah, there are mushrooms everywhere, even in parking lots. You just have to know where to look and what to look for. And if you look at the smallest scale, like if you go even just to the ground and start peeking with a little magnifying glass, you'll find mushrooms too. From the macro to the micro, they exist.
So most people think of mushrooms as food, basically. And, there was the question that always comes up with, can I eat this mushroom?
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent are edible mushrooms sort of available in the wild, say in this area? And how hard is it to determine whether they're edible or not?
Unless you're walking with somebody who is an expert in the field of foraging, or you have at least 3 solid reference points for going out and foraging for mushrooms, I would say it's not recommended to go out and look for mushrooms. But if you know what you're doing, you've been foraging already, or you've been foraging with somebody who knows what they're doing, or you're with somebody who knows what they're doing, ideally, then it's pretty easy to tell which ones are edible and which ones aren't, because the ones that aren't edible or that are questionably edible, those are the ones that you won't mess with. You won't even try it. But if it is edible, it's pretty easy to tell, because it's going to be one of the more common ones that, like, for example, you can go out and find chicken of the woods in our area between August and the beginning of November in Central Texas. And that one doesn't have it doesn't have any lookalikes during this season that would potentially make you confuse it with one that isn't edible. It is a tasty edible that is very clearly chicken of the woods, and there's no lookalikes. So you can go out and forage for that particular mushroom as an amateur and have pretty good success at finding that mushroom and knowing with certainty what it is, and be confident in eating it. But there are other ones like oyster mushrooms where there are some very close lookalikes that the gills run a little bit differently, and the shape of it is just a little different. The color is just slightly, just a slight shade different. But the ones that are edible and the ones that aren't edible, they grow in the same place. So as an amateur, you wouldn't want to go out and forage for those, because you could potentially find one that is not edible and make yourself sick, and that's no fun for anybody.
Yeah,
so,
and one thing that you pointed out on that walk is even edible mushrooms could be growing in an area where there's pollution of some kind and still would not be safe to eat.
mm-hmm.
I can't remember it. There was a toxic area that we were in, or one that had been polluted. You remember what I'm referring to? You were saying that there was probably some heavy metal pollution there.
Yeah, there's usually a lot of heavy metal pollution in waterways that have been flooded, or industrial sites where there had been like dumpings of different things.
I think that's what it was. It was a former industrial site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, that's a very good observation, as well as when you're out harvesting or foraging for mushrooms, be aware of the environment that it's in. Is it a clean environment? Is it in the middle of the city? Is it somewhere where you know that if you eat food from here, you're not going to be consuming some potential environmental hazards that are in that area? Because that mushrooms hyperaccumulate their environment. They're very good at taking what's in their environment and putting that in themselves, which is beneficial when we use them for remediation of the soil specifically, because they can concentrate those heavy metals or those toxic components we don't want, and then we can remove the mushrooms and thus remove a good portion of those contaminants. But when we're cultivating mushrooms, we want to be very careful about what we feed them, what we feed the mycelium, because it will end up in the mushrooms, and then it'll end up in us. So it can lead to some nasty stuff happening. And that's why there's a really cool story of that happening around the site in Chernobyl. And specifically what the mushrooms did was absorb excessive amounts of radiation, and they survived. They're able to process an extreme amount of radiation, something that would normally kill a human, because very similar to us, they developed melanin in their skin. They adapted to that environment and developed a melanin components in their cells to protect them from radiation, thus making them more resilient to radiation. So that's one aspect of mycelium becoming adapted to its environment, hyper accumulating what is in there, and being able to thrive in that environment. So we can use that mycelium, let's say in spacecraft, in the walls of spacecraft. We could potentially have some sort of nutrient film that we have on a wall and spray mycelium on that. And as the mycelium grows on that wall, it forms melanin in its cells and protects the occupants of a spacecraft from radiation, potentially. Or we can even cultivate that mushroom and maybe not give it excessive amounts of radiation, but just enough to form the melanin in the cells, and then consume it for ourselves. Because when you consume mushrooms that contain melanin, they give you a little bit of radiation protection for your cells. Again, the adaptogenic nature of them. When you consume it, it adapts inside of your body and can absorb about, it's 80% of ionizing radiation. So specifically, the mushrooms that can do that are wood ear or auricularia and old man of the woods or Strombomyces.
So what would life be like if there was no fungus, if there were no mushrooms?
If there were no mushrooms, life would be stagnant. Mushrooms are they're the movers and the shakers and the doers of the world. They take all those locked up nutrients and minerals and make them available to more life. So without mushrooms, we would be looking at a planet choked in plant life, overgrown, probably with a lot more oil than we have right now. When specifically white rot fungus like oyster mushrooms evolved about 250 million years ago, there was a complete halt of oil production on Earth because they started moving the nutrients around. They started recycling the components of the plants back into the soil so it could be made into new plants consistently, instead of those plants just stacking layer on layer on layer and getting pressurized.
And don't mycelial networks have some role in sort of like communication between, say, trees?
Yes, absolutely. So there's several types of mycelium that exists, and one type is the mycorrhizal mycelium, and that one specifically, mycorrhizal fungi, they exist in the soil and they connect plants to each other. So they connect basically the forest to itself. Like if you go out and stand in a heavily wooded area that's got some older trees in it, something that hasn't been too disturbed by human presence, when you take a step, you're stepping on 3 to 12 miles of mycelium with each footstep that you take. So you could be standing between 6 and 24 miles of mycelium when you're just standing in a forest somewhere, which is an insane amount of carbon material connecting things just underneath your feet. But if we look at other mycelium, like the endophytic mycelium, those exist inside of the walls of cells. So they help with nutrient transfer. They are present in a majority of plants that we use for cultivating food, but also plants that exist in our environments. What they do is they help the plant adapt to its environment. Again, they're adaptogenic. So they adapt the plant to its environment, increasing its rates for survival, and then also its ability for production. So if we have, let's say, a tomato plant, one tomato plant has endophytic fungus and one doesn't, the one that does is going to be a lot better off than the one that doesn't, because it has a better nutrient availability and transfer.
Over the years, I've read about fungal colonies that perhaps, according to the people writing these articles, were perhaps the largest living beings, if you will, on the planet, that cover not just a few hundred yards, but miles and miles and miles, and it's one entity. Is there anything like that in Central Texas?
Not that we found yet. Central Texas doesn't have the consistent environment that the Pacific Northwest does. Specifically, the being that you're talking about is the honey fungus, or Armorillia, and that one is located in Oregon. It's a couple, I believe it's 2,100 square miles, if I remember correctly, which is an insane amount of being. That it's the largest being on Earth that is living. And there's nothing quite so large here in Texas, but if you go to the forests, especially the older ones here in Texas and East Texas specifically, you'll see, like in the big thicket and the little thicket, you'll see some really, really beautiful mushrooms. And if you dig around in the soil, even just a little bit, you'll find more mycelium than you can imagine. And there's more mushrooms that fruit out there that fruit anywhere in Texas. It's one of the more bioactive regions of our state, especially for mushrooms. So there might be something that exists there that is like a big mycorrhizal network, but we haven't studied it enough to conclude that for sure there's one there and this is how big it is and this is the species and all that stuff. We need more people going out and looking at those mushrooms and studying that stuff, and more citizen scientists that are passionate about being out in the field and studying mushrooms.
And that's what the Mycological Society is doing, correct?
Right.
Sort of
so
cultivating that.
Exactly. We function as a vehicle for information and connection. So we want to connect people with other people who are interested in the same thing, so that way they can form clubs or circles, leadership circles in our group, that their sole purpose is to be passionate about whatever they're passionate about. Mushroom music, it could be bioremediation, it could be cultivation, whatever the case may be. We want people to have a space to come and gather and share their knowledge and brainstorm together.
Well, what sort of things are happening out there at Circle Acres? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, Circle Acres, there's a group that Ecology Action owns the space of Circle Acres, and then within Circle Acres, there's the Circle Acres the research station, the Mycological Research Station, and right now that's run by Carter and Perry, who are also leaders in the Mycological Society. And it's basically a space started by Daniel Reyes of Myco Alliance that is there to showcase what mycelium can do. There's different building projects that have been done out there, or like molds that have been made using mycelium. There's also a brownfield site that is in the back of the research station, where layer upon layer of saprophytic mycelium from the mushroom farm, spent blocks from the mushroom farm Hi-Fi Mycology in North Austin have been put there and layered and layered over time to remediate the brownfield. So there's just so much that goes on. I'm trying to organize it really quickly. It's also a space for outdoor cultivation. So an area where people can see how mushrooms can fruit out in their yards, or they can be put into a sort of greenhouse. We have a greenhouse there where we fruit just mushroom blocks. And every step of the process, from feeding cardboard to mycelium, to feeding your yard trimmings to mycelium, to doing low-tech cultivation for you to fruit mushrooms out of 5-gallon buckets, to remediating a big old brown field and seeing how that process is started and what happens in that.
I just found this site for Daniel Reyes, really, and it has quite a few photographs on it. Like this mycelium berm, that's kind of interesting. What's happening there?
So that is, I believe that is part of the, oh yes, so that is a berm that was created with mycelium. So those mycelium blocks were buried under wood chips to help with the water filtration in that area, but also just to stop the soil from eroding so quickly, because there's a lot of soil erosion that happens in that area, because before it was a brown field, it was also a mining site, a sand mining site. So it's got a lot of loose soil. That soil washes out really quickly. The neighborhood above that area is called the Montopolis neighborhood. It's one of the oldest in Austin, and it's experiencing a lot of movement in the soil. A lot of foundations of houses have shifted because of these vacuums of space that have been created. So we can use mycelium in a really awesome way by making mycoberms, which is essentially wood berms that have been inoculated with different types of mycelium and then fortified with either soil or wood chips. Those can hold in moisture, thus creating garden spaces in the future, but more importantly, they can stop soil erosion, which is beneficial for pretty much for everything in the environment.
That's
A lot of
fascinating.
a lot of your work has been focused on the non-psychedelic part of mushrooms, but a lot of study is going on right now about microdosing of psychedelics. And does your group look at that at all?
Our group doesn't personally study those aspects of mycelium. What we do is connect the community to people who study that. So we recently had a class where we showcased a doctor who is studying microdosing, and she gave a wonderful presentation about the benefits of microdosing, some microdosing regimens, her experiences and the experiences of her patients that or people who that have taken it around her that have benefited from it. So we don't personally do study, but we do have people that are interested in that study that are in our group.
Yeah, there was I'm trying to think of the name of the book. There was a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes, fantastic.
And, yeah, it's kind of an amazing book. And it covers a lot of ground. He doesn't talk, I mean, he's not talking about mycology, but he is talking about the use of psychedelics and research into the use of psychedelics, specifically medicinal uses and therapeutic uses. And that stuff was all really hard to study because, you couldn't really legally lay your hands on psychedelics, but psilocybin mushrooms have been pretty available. And I guess that even though you might not be able to have done a formal study legally using psilocybin mushrooms, I'm sure that people have been doing research all along,
Oh yes, most definitely. I'm sure it's all like, it's a lot of it is nuanced self-study, because with every substance that you take, your body is different from everybody else's. So how it affects you may differ from how it affects somebody else. And it might be for you, it might not be for you. So there are a bunch of psychonauts out there that are pushing the limits of how much humans can take and seeing where that goes in their journey. And then there are others that are microdosing and taking the most minimal amounts that they can take to get the benefits without getting the change in their experience. So there's aspects for everybody, and I'm so thrilled that there's more study, scientific study and formal study going on in universities now, so it can become more publicized and less stigmatized.
I think one of the difficulties, I guess, in Western medicine and just kind of in thinking about therapies and so forth, is that you can't really apply a template. You can't see everybody through the same lens, and you have to sort of figure out what's different about a person in order to treat them. And the best physicians know how to do that, or think to do that. But that's not exactly how medicine, as near as I can tell, is taught, because they sort of have to teach sort of standard approaches and universal ways of dealing with things. And I think that there's a whole, like a huge there's big room for study of differences, and how people vary and how those variations can be understood and incorporated into your thinking about how to do a therapy for a specific person.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about e-patients or empowered patients who, sort of work with their doctors, but they have a big role in their own therapy because they know their bodies. Mm-hmm. And they know the doctor may know medicine, but you know your body. Anyway, that's a little bit of a divergence there, but I think
the last person I want to talk to about holistic medicine is a doctor. I remember when that was first becoming a thing, and I was working with a medical group, and anytime you mention that around an MD, they'd do the eye roll. And it's like, oh, great, now we've got to listen to the hippie talk about holistic medicine. Not many years later, they were indulging themselves in learning about holistic medicine because they found out it actually works.
Yeah, there's something to it. Traditional Chinese medicine too is a very different approach from Western medicine, but it has quite a bit of success, and has been around probably longer. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're diverging somewhat from our subject. I was going to ask you about farming mushrooms. If you just wanted to grow your own little mushroom farm, how would you approach that?
Well, it really depends on what kind of mushrooms you're growing, what scale you want to grow it at, and how you're growing. Are you growing indoors or outdoors? So there's a lot of ways that you can approach it. You can approach it from a very low-tech perspective where you're picking up secondhand materials like the chaff from coffee grounds, so the hulls, the coffee ground bean shells, mm-hmm. old coffee grounds, spent grains from breweries, cardboard from different places, different stores around the area, and mushroom blocks from farms that are considered waste products. So the spent blocks from mushroom farms, and then combining all those back together in 5-gallon buckets, which you can get for free at HEB. They throw them out quite often, food grade buckets. So you could do it that method and get a pretty good production of gourmet mushrooms fruiting for pretty cheap. It just takes a lot of effort in going around and getting all those materials. And that's the one that I'll be most comfortable speaking about, because the other methods involve a lot more equipment, a lot more time, a lot more dedication, a lot more inputs in terms of the amount of materials that you need, fresh materials, as well as equipment that you'll need to buy offhand just to make sure that you have a sterile environment.
Do we have a lot of commercial mushroom farms in the area?
We have quite a few. We have one very big commercial mushroom farm called Smallhold, and they stock all the HEBs, Central Markets, Whole Foods, and then we have some smaller ones that are also in the area starting up. We have Marisol's mushrooms in Bastrop, Hi-Fi Mycology in North Austin, South Texas Seasonals in San Antonio, Myco Buddy also in San Antonio. I'm a small time producer in New Braunfels, Sam the Fungi, and a few other various smaller mushroom farms that are in the area that, yeah, they're still pretty small and up and coming right now. So
The Central Market, for instance, has a pretty big and diverse collection of edible mushrooms that they sell. Are they able to source all those locally, or are they having to bring some of those in from elsewhere?
I think some of them are brought in from elsewhere, especially the chanterelles, because they don't grow in our particular ecology. They grow they grow in Austin, but they don't grow in plethora. So they have to ship some of them in, but the oysters and the other ones, they're grown locally, most likely by Smallhold or some other larger mushroom production. But we also have another large mushroom production in Gonzales, Texas as well.
So plug yourself a little bit. Talk about what you do as Sam the Fungi. I mean, I know that was an incredible experience going on that walk with you the other day. You had kind of a herd of people walking along with you. And man, I picked up a lot of knowledge just from that relatively short hike. But
yeah,
just kind of talk about the work that you do.
For sure. Well, thank you for those words. I'm glad that for your feedback that you had a good time.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I do. I lead a lot of walks with the Central Texas Mycological Society. I occasionally do private walks, and what I do for Sam the Fungi is connect people to the power of mycelium. So going out for walks, teaching people how to cultivate mushrooms, either privately or public classes through PTMS. I build mushroom garden beds, so either inoculating people's gardens with fungus and leading them through the process of why that's good, how to maintain it, what to look for, or building outdoor fruiting mushroom beds for people where their sole purpose is to produce fruit bodies of mushrooms like oysters, shiitakes, and lion's mane. And I also connect growers. I work with a lot of cannabis farms in Texas, a lot of indoor hemp farms. And what I do is different types of experiments. Like right now, what we're doing is taking different blocks of mycelium and putting them in the chambers with the hemp flowers and letting there become a symbiotic relationship between the mycelium in the bags and the hemp plants in the pots, seeing if there's some gas exchange that will occur. And yeah, that's pretty much it for what I do as Sam the Fungi. A lot of education, connecting people to mycelium. And my favorite thing to do is lead people on walks. So that by far it fills my heart with joy to be able to lead people through an area and teach them about foraging, the ethics of foraging, the history of foraging, and the connection that we can have with our planet, with our mother, and the respect that can come from that. And then the gratitude that is endemic once you are connected with nature.
You know, one thing I thought about when you were talking earlier about, thinking about cannabis, which has a lot of therapeutic uses, and mushrooms obviously have a lot of therapeutic uses. So there are these various natural ways to heal. and that there could be synergies of different plants. And then there could also be potential, I guess, adverse interactions from combining plants. Are there people who are like studying that sort of thing and producing more guidance as to how to combine things more effectively?
Yes, most definitely. There's a lot of people, especially in the universities. That's where the universities are more equipped because they have the funding to house the equipment that's needed to really study that kind of stuff, because it is a really small scale. So having higher tech equipment makes everything easier. And then they also have people that are dedicated to just studying that. So there's a lot of things that are coming out. I know one company, Wild Root Organics in North Texas, run by David Steinbrunner. He has done a lot of study with Texas A&M regarding mycorrhizal fungi, and his company Wild Root it is a mycorrhizal fungi production company, and it's, from what I've done in my garden, putting that mycorrhizae, it has a tremendously beneficial effect to the health of the plants and also the connection with the connection those plants have with the mycorrhizae.
And we know that people can have adverse reactions to mushrooms. Have you ever had an adverse reaction to eating a mushroom?
You know, I have not yet had an extremely adverse reaction. I've had a reaction where I ate a mushroom that I thought was edible, but I wanted to test it to make sure. And I put a little piece in my mouth and it tasted like pepper, like very, very strong peppercorn. And I had to spit it out. It tasted delicious in my mouth, but I knew that flavor wasn't something that I was looking for in that mushroom. So that was, to me, an adverse reaction because it wasn't something that I was looking for. I have had an adverse reaction to edible mushrooms, chicken of the woods. So when you eat wild mushrooms and you're not used to eating them and you eat a lot of them, it could really mess your stomach up because they have very strong very strong cells, which is basically fiber. They have a lot of chitin in them, and it's not digestible, so it can really upset your stomach. It's like eating a ton of fiber. So
yeah, you can overdose on fiber for sure.
Yeah, I definitely had an adverse reaction to eating a lot of chicken of the woods before, but other than that, I haven't had too many, or I haven't had any.
Well, I had an adverse reaction to eating a mushroom back some long time ago, but it was because someone decided they were going to make a mushroom margarita, and that was a very bad idea, and I can just attest to that. Don't try that at home or anywhere else.
Well, Sam, I really want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a really great talk.
Yes, absolutely. There's one more thing I would like to mention regarding the negative reactions or negative potential reactions for consuming mushrooms. There are some edible mushrooms and medicinal mushrooms that react to certain medications. Like I mentioned, reishi is an immunomodulator. Well, if you're on blood pressure medication that lowers your blood pressure, if you drink or consistently take reishi, that could also potentially lower your blood pressure even further. So thus putting you in that danger of fainting or collapse. So there are some reactions to different mushrooms and medication that definitely need to be looked at. So always, before you consume anything new, check with your doctor and see if there's any reactions potentially. But more importantly, do your own research and look into it. Make sure that you feel comfortable and you feel confident that what you're going to consume isn't going to cause you harm. And then take it easy, take it slow. You don't have to start out with a mega dose of mushrooms right away to get the most amazing effects possible. It takes time. Slowly ease yourself into the world of taking mushrooms. If you've never taken them before and you're interested in trying them, just take little bits at a time, microdose it. But
if you ask your doctor, they're probably not going to know the answer. And if they don't know the answer, they're probably just going to say, no, don't do that.
right.
So,
Yeah.
you might want to take the doctor's response with a grain of salt, though. Of course, you should always, I don't know. I don't want to say don't listen to your doctor.
Yeah.
But
Well, don't say.
doctors are people too.
Yeah,
listen to your doctor, talk to your doctor, and evaluate what they tell you.
Yeah, it's like the fifth agreement in the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, where he's talking about that. What is the fifth agreement is be skeptical, learn to listen, and be skeptical. So that's why it's
the greatest advice ever.
Very good advice.
Yeah. Always be skeptical. Don't believe anyone, not even yourself.
Least of all yourself.
Don't
believe the voices in your head.
Oh my God.
They're not always friendly.
No, there's some straight nonsense that can come out if you stay in the voices in your head for too long. So
absolutely. Well, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
And we will talk to you again soon and hopefully go on another walk with you.
Yes, please. And if anybody out there is interested in going on walks, please feel free to reach out to me. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Sam the Fungi. You can also become a member of the Central Texas Mycological Society. We have yearly memberships available. Through that, you get discounted classes. You get to go on walks with me. You get to go and do different cool things regarding mycological adventures in Texas, like forays and excursions, and just get access to a group of amazing people that are all studying mushrooms and all interested in the same thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lepkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.